Somewhere in the world, at this very moment, a person with fewer comforts than you, fewer opportunities than you, and far greater burdens than you, is living with more peace than many people ever find. Not because life has been kinder to them, not because they were born with extraordinary strength. Their advantage is quieter than that. Over time, they built a handful of simple habits into the way they think and live. Habits so ordinary that most people overlook them, yet powerful enough to change how a person experiences success, disappointment, and even the ordinary moments in between. The Stoics understood this long before the modern world became obsessed with happiness. They believed that lasting peace is not discovered by chasing more. It is cultivated through the small choices we repeat until they become part of our character. Modern life encourages us to keep reaching for the next achievement, the next relationship, the next purchase, or the next milestone, quietly promising that happiness is waiting just beyond whatever comes next. Yet every destination has a way of becoming ordinary once we arrive. Satisfaction fades, expectations grow, and the finish line moves a little farther away. Stoicism offers a different perspective. It suggests that the quality of your life depends far less on what happens around you than on the habits that quietly shape your mind each day. The smallest decisions, repeated consistently, often become the turning points that change an entire life. Perhaps that is why the happiest people rarely appear to possess perfect lives. They simply relate to life differently. They meet uncertainty with steadiness, setbacks with perspective, and ordinary days with a quiet sense of gratitude that does not depend on fortune. These habits are not dramatic. Most take only a few moments to practice. Yet repeated over months and years, they gradually build something that circumstances cannot easily take away: a peaceful mind, resilient character, and a life guided from within rather than controlled by whatever happens outside. Most people begin each morning by handing their attention to whatever demands it first. Before they even leave the bed, they unlock a screen and invite countless voices into a mind that has not yet chosen its own direction. News, messages, opinions, expectations, and invisible comparisons rush in before a single deliberate thought has appeared. It feels harmless because almost everyone does it. But repeated often enough, attention becomes character. The Stoics understood that whatever repeatedly captures the mind eventually shapes judgment. A distracted morning rarely produces a peaceful day. A quiet beginning, on the other hand, strengthens every decision that follows, even when circumstances refuse to cooperate. That first choice may seem insignificant, but it quietly teaches the mind how to meet the rest of the day. Marcus Aurelius understood this through experience rather than theory. He governed an empire filled with conflict, uncertainty, illness, betrayal, and impossible decisions. Every sunrise carried responsibilities capable of overwhelming almost anyone. Yet before answering petitions or commanding armies, he returned to his own thoughts first. His private writings reveal someone reminding himself that patience, fairness, humility, and discipline deserved attention before ambition or anxiety. He never assumed calm would arrive naturally. He cultivated it deliberately. That distinction matters because modern life often convinces us that emotional stability appears after circumstances improve. Stoic practice reverses that order. Inner preparation comes first. Then the world meets a steadier person instead of trying to create one. Think about the difference between waking with intention and waking in reaction. One person begins the day by choosing their thoughts. The other lets the world choose them. Although both may face identical schedules, their internal experience quickly separates. Attention becomes emotional momentum. Whatever owns your first few minutes usually owns much of the day. Modern psychology has a name for this: priming. The experiences that shape your first moments quietly influence everything that follows. The Stoics reached the same conclusion simply by observing human nature. They notice that disciplined mornings often produce disciplined responses long after sunrise had passed. This does not require elaborate routines or perfect conditions. Many people believe meaningful change demands an hour of meditation, expensive journals, or complete silence before dawn. Those ideas often discourage the very people who need steady habits most. A single quiet minute can interrupt automatic behavior. One thoughtful sentence written on paper can redirect an entire afternoon. One slow breath before reaching for your phone reminds you that your attention still belongs to you. Small actions repeated consistently become trusted rituals, and trusted rituals gradually become identity. Consistency matters more than intensity because the mind changes through repetition, not occasional bursts of enthusiasm. Gentle discipline almost always outlasts dramatic promises. There is another quiet benefit hidden inside these first moments. Choosing your own thoughts before absorbing everyone else's reminds you that freedom begins internally. Circumstances may remain unpredictable, co-workers may still disappoint, traffic may still delay plans, and unexpected problems may still appear. None of that changes because of a peaceful morning. What changes is the person meeting those events. Calm preparation creates space between experience and reaction. Within that space, wiser choices become possible. Instead of speaking impulsively, you pause. Instead of assuming the worst, you observe. That small distance often prevents hours of unnecessary frustration. Over time, those moments become quiet confidence, not because life becomes predictable, but because your responses become more dependable. Many people spend years searching for motivation because they believe they must feel inspired before they act. Stoic philosophy gently challenges that belief. Action often comes first. Feeling slowly follows. Waiting until the mind feels ready gives passing emotions authority they rarely deserve. Beginning anyway teaches the mind a different lesson. Character is built by repeated choices, not repeated moods. Every morning offers another opportunity to reinforce that truth without announcing it to anyone else. Quiet victories usually remain invisible, yet they shape the strongest foundations because they are practiced for their own sake, rather than recognition. Those quiet decisions echo much farther than the moment they were made. Eventually, these mornings stop feeling like a technique and begin feeling like an honest expression of who you are becoming. The Stoics never demanded perfection. They asked only for steady effort, sincere reflection, and the willingness to begin again whenever yesterday fell short. Each sunrise becomes less about controlling the world and more about governing your own mind with patience and clarity. That simple shift changes far more than productivity. It changes relationships, resilience, gratitude, and peace. Long before anyone else notices the difference, you quietly realize that the day no longer owns you. You have learned to meet it on your own terms. If these ideas are helping you see your own life a little more clearly, consider subscribing. Stoicism was never meant to be admired from a distance. It was meant to be practiced, one thoughtful day at a time. Most people believe the painful event itself is what steals their peace. Often it is not. The event may last a few seconds, a few hours, or perhaps a difficult season. What continues hurting long after the event has ended is the argument taking place inside the mind. Thoughts begin insisting that this should never have happened, that people should have behaved differently, that life has somehow violated an unwritten agreement. Without realizing it, we replay the same scene repeatedly, hoping that enough frustration might somehow rewrite what has already become reality. Yet reality has no interest in negotiations. It remains exactly as it is, completely unaffected by our resistance. The Stoics recognized this with remarkable clarity. They understood that every minute spent demanding a different past quietly removes another minute from building a better future. That invisible exchange happens so naturally that many people spend years making it without noticing the cost. Think about how quickly an ordinary inconvenience can grow into something much larger. A delayed train becomes an entire morning ruined. One careless remark becomes hours of silent resentment. A mistake at work follows someone home, sits beside them during dinner, and even steals their sleep. The original event may have lasted only a brief moment, yet the mind extends it by replaying every detail as though repetition could somehow produce a different ending. Psychology calls this rumination, a cycle of repetitive thinking that feeds anxiety and emotional exhaustion. The Stoics observed the same pattern centuries earlier through careful attention to human behavior. They noticed that people often carried yesterday's burden into tomorrow without ever setting it down. The weight was no longer coming from the event itself. It was coming from the endless habit of mentally reliving what could never be altered. Responsibility does not mean taking fault for every difficulty. It means recognizing that while circumstances belong partly to fortune, your response always belongs to you. There is quiet strength hidden inside that realization. No disappointment can completely take away your ability to choose patience instead of panic, wisdom instead of impulse, or clarity instead of resentment. Those choices may not erase pain, but they prevent pain from expanding into something far more destructive. Every difficult moment quietly becomes an opportunity to practice the qualities that easier days never demand from us. This way of thinking becomes especially valuable when dealing with other people. Expectations often create invisible contracts that nobody else agreed to sign. We expect loyalty, fairness, gratitude, honesty, and understanding. When those expectations are broken, disappointment naturally follows. Yet the Stoics gently remind us that human beings are imperfect by nature. People act from fear, confusion, pride, insecurity, and misunderstanding more often than from wisdom. Recognizing this does not excuse harmful behavior, but it reduces unnecessary surprise. Marcus Aurelius began many mornings reminding himself that he would encounter difficult people before the day was over. He did not make this reflection to become cynical. He made it so that ordinary human imperfection would not steal his inner stability the moment it appeared. Preparedness softens frustration because the mind no longer treats predictable difficulties as shocking interruptions to life. Gradually, this practice transforms the way setbacks are experienced. Instead of becoming evidence that life is unfair, obstacles become opportunities to discover what has already been built within. Patience cannot exist without delay. Courage cannot exist without fear. Forgiveness cannot exist without offense. Resilience cannot exist without hardship. The very experiences we often wish to avoid are the ones that quietly reveal our deepest growth. This perspective does not remove pain, nor should it. It simply ensures that pain serves a purpose instead of becoming permanent. Happiness begins to return the moment we stop demanding an easier past and begin asking how this present moment can make us wiser. That simple shift rarely changes the world around us overnight, but it changes the person living inside it. Over time, that becomes the greatest change of all, quietly shaping every challenge that follows with lasting inner steadiness. Once we stop exhausting ourselves by arguing with reality, something else quietly comes into view. A different kind of question begins asking for our attention. How much of what occupies the mind each day actually belongs to us? At first, the answer seems obvious. We assume nearly everything deserves our concern because it affects our lives in one way or another. Yet a closer look reveals something surprising. Much of our emotional energy is spent chasing outcomes we cannot command, predicting futures we cannot see, or trying to control people whose thoughts and choices have never belonged to us. We worry about whether someone understands our intentions, whether a decision made months ago will eventually prove correct, or whether circumstances beyond our reach will unfold the way we hope. The mind treats every possibility as if worrying about it increases our influence. In reality, it often does the opposite. It leaves us mentally scattered, emotionally tired, and strangely disconnected from the only place where meaningful action is still possible, the present moment. Think about how often a single conversation continues long after it has ended. Someone says something careless, and hours later, the mind is still rewriting replies that will never be spoken. A meeting finishes, yet we keep wondering what everyone thought about us. A message goes unanswered for longer than expected, and suddenly countless explanations begin filling the silence. None of these thoughts change the situation. They simply consume attention that could have been invested somewhere meaningful. Modern psychology describes this pattern as an illusion of control, the tendency to believe our thinking can somehow influence events that remain completely independent of it. The Stoics recognized the same habit centuries ago. They observed that the mind naturally wanders toward uncertainty because uncertainty creates the illusion that more thinking will eventually produce safety. Instead, it often produces only exhaustion. Peace begins returning the moment attention is gently guided back toward what can actually be done now. Marcus Aurelius practiced this distinction repeatedly, especially during the most demanding years of his reign. He could prepare his armies with care, but he could not guarantee victory. He could govern with fairness, but he could not prevent criticism. He could treat others with respect, yet he could not force them to return it. Instead of measuring success by outcomes beyond his command, he measured it by whether he acted according to his principles. That shift protected something deeply important. It prevented his peace from depending entirely on circumstances that changed every day. The same principle quietly applies to ordinary life. You can prepare carefully for an interview without controlling the final decision. You can love someone deeply without controlling their choices. You can raise children with patience and wisdom without controlling every direction their lives eventually take. Effort belongs to you. Outcomes belong to life. This perspective does not reduce ambition or weaken commitment. If anything, it strengthens both. When attention is no longer divided between meaningful action and endless speculation, every effort becomes clearer. There is less hesitation because energy is no longer leaking into imagined futures. There is less resentment because success is no longer measured solely by external rewards. A gardener understands this naturally. They prepare the soil, plant carefully, provide water, and protect the growing plant when possible. Yet they cannot command the seasons or force growth before its time. Their responsibility ends where nature begins. Human life follows a similar rhythm. We are responsible for planting good actions, not for controlling every harvest. That understanding transforms work from constant anxiety into steady practice. Instead of trying to dominate uncertainty, we learn to cooperate with it while remaining faithful to what depends on us. The same lesson becomes especially valuable within relationships. Many people quietly carry responsibility for emotions that belong to someone else. They feel guilty for another person's disappointment, anxious about another person's expectations, or endlessly preoccupied with changing minds that have already been made up. Compassion is a beautiful quality, but compassion is not the same as ownership. The Stoics encouraged kindness without emotional captivity. You can offer support without carrying another person's entire journey on your shoulders. You can listen sincerely without sacrificing your own inner stability. Healthy boundaries are not expressions of distance. They are expressions of wisdom. They recognize that genuine care becomes stronger, not weaker, when it grows from clarity instead of obligation. Trying to rescue everyone eventually leaves no strength for living your own life with the integrity you hope to offer others. When the mind is no longer consumed by trying to control everything outside its reach, something remarkable begins to happen. Space appears. Not empty space, but useful space. The kind that allows a person to slow down long enough to notice themselves honestly. Many people spend years moving from one responsibility to the next, without ever pausing to examine how they are actually living. Days become weeks, weeks become months, and before long, entire seasons of life seem to disappear into memory without leaving behind anything clearly understood. Activity is mistaken for progress simply because life feels busy. Yet movement alone has never guaranteed growth. The Stoics believed that a person could accomplish countless tasks while quietly drifting farther away from the character they hoped to build. That is why they treated reflection not as a luxury reserved for peaceful moments, but as a daily discipline that protected the direction of their lives. Seneca wrote about this practice with remarkable honesty. At the end of each day, when the noise had settled and the demands of the world had finally grown quiet, he would review his actions with complete sincerity. He asked himself where he had shown wisdom, where impatience had taken over, where fear had influenced a decision, and where he could respond differently tomorrow. He did not approach these moments like a harsh judge searching for reasons to condemn himself. He approached them like a careful teacher helping a willing student improve. That difference changes everything. Many people avoid self-reflection because they secretly believe it requires self-punishment. The Stoics understood that guilt alone rarely creates lasting change. Awareness does. When we see ourselves clearly, improvement becomes possible without the burden of constant shame. Gentle honesty often accomplishes far more than relentless criticism ever could. There is something quietly powerful about ending a day by asking whether your actions matched your values, instead of whether everything went according to plan. Those are very different questions. One depends on circumstances that often remain outside your influence. The other depends entirely on your own conduct. Perhaps a difficult conversation did not end well, but did you remain respectful? Perhaps a goal remains unfinished, but did you give your best effort today? Perhaps fear appeared, but did you allow it to decide everything for you? Reflection shifts attention away from perfection and toward intention. It reminds us that character is measured less by flawless outcomes and more by the quality of our responses. Every evening becomes another opportunity to gently reconnect with the person we are trying to become before another day quietly begins again. Modern psychology continues to confirm something the Stoics recognized through careful observation. People who regularly reflect on their experiences tend to learn from them more effectively than those who simply move forward without looking back. The mind naturally repeats familiar patterns, especially when those patterns remain unnoticed. Without reflection, habits become invisible. Reactions become automatic. Small mistakes quietly become permanent routines simply because they are never examined closely enough to change. Reflection interrupts that cycle. It creates a pause between experience and repetition, allowing wisdom to replace instinct. This process rarely feels dramatic. Most evenings reveal no extraordinary discoveries. Instead, they offer small corrections, a little more patience, a little less distraction, a little more courage. Those small adjustments seem insignificant on any single day, yet over months and years they quietly reshape an entire life. Over time, this habit changes far more than memory. It changes identity. A person who consistently examines their life begins making better decisions almost naturally because awareness starts appearing before action instead of after it. Reactions become more deliberate. Priorities become clearer. Mistakes still happen, but they no longer remain teachers ignored. They become lessons accepted with humility and carried forward with purpose. The Stoics never expected perfection from themselves because they understood perfection is not the goal. Steady improvement is. A meaningful life is built through thousands of ordinary days honestly examined, gently corrected, and gratefully lived. One evening at a time, one thoughtful reflection after another, character quietly becomes stronger than circumstance, and the person you hope to become slowly begins looking back at you from the mirror with quiet confidence and lasting peace. Reflection does more than help us understand yesterday. If practiced consistently, it slowly changes the way we approach tomorrow. The shift is subtle at first, almost impossible to notice from one day to the next, but over time it reshapes our relationship with uncertainty itself. Most people assume that peace comes from eliminating difficulty, so they spend enormous amounts of energy trying to arrange life into something predictable. They want clear answers before making decisions, guarantees before taking risks, and certainty before moving forward. Yet life has never promised any of those things. Plans change without warning. Opportunities disappear. People surprise us, sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse. The Stoics never viewed these moments as evidence that something had gone wrong. They saw them as reminders that uncertainty is not standing outside life waiting to interrupt it. It has always been part of life from the very beginning. Modern culture quietly teaches the opposite lesson. We are surrounded by messages promising smoother paths, faster results, fewer setbacks, and endless convenience. Success is often presented as a straight line, while struggle is treated as proof that we have made a mistake. It is no surprise that so many people become discouraged the moment life grows difficult. They were never taught to expect resistance. They were taught to expect comfort. Every obstacle then feels personal, almost unfair, because it seems to violate the picture they carried in their minds. The disappointment often comes less from the obstacle itself than from the gap between reality and expectation. When that gap becomes large enough, even ordinary problems begin to feel overwhelming. The Stoics deliberately narrowed that gap. Marcus Aurelius regularly reminded himself that he would encounter impatience, selfishness, misunderstanding, and disappointment before the day was over. This was never an exercise in pessimism. It was an exercise in clarity. They understood that expecting perfection leaves the mind fragile, while expecting reality allows it to remain steady. When something difficult finally happened, they were not shocked into panic because they had already accepted that life unfolds according to its own nature, not according to our preferences. Preparation transformed surprise into recognition. Instead of thinking, "This should not be happening," they quietly thought, "This is one of the moments I knew would eventually arrive." There is a remarkable psychological difference between being surprised by hardship and being prepared for its possibility. Consider two people facing the same setback. One believes setbacks are rare interruptions that should never have happened. The other understands they are ordinary chapters in every meaningful life. Their external circumstances are identical, yet their internal experience is completely different. The first person immediately feels cheated, while the second begins looking for the wisest response. The challenge has not changed, but the relationship to the challenge has. That relationship often determines whether a difficult season becomes a source of lasting growth or lingering bitterness. The Stoics recognized that our expectations quietly shape our emotional reactions long before any event actually occurs. This perspective also changes the way we define courage. Many people think courage means never feeling fear or uncertainty. The Stoics saw courage differently. It was the willingness to continue acting according to reason, even while uncertainty remained. Fear did not have to disappear before action became possible. Doubt did not need to be completely resolved before the next step could be taken. Waiting for perfect confidence often means waiting forever. Progress belongs to those who accept that uncertainty walks beside every worthwhile pursuit. The happiest people are rarely those who possess complete certainty. More often, they are the ones who have learned that certainty was never a requirement for living well in the first place. This way of thinking becomes especially valuable during seasons that refuse to make sense. There are moments when answers arrive slowly, when effort seems disconnected from results, and when patience feels far more difficult than action. Those periods test expectations more than abilities. The mind naturally wants immediate resolution, yet life frequently develops at its own pace. The Stoics encouraged remaining faithful to good principles even when outcomes remained unclear. A seed does not become a tree overnight simply because someone wishes it to. Growth often happens beneath the surface long before visible change appears. The same is true of character. Some of our most important transformations take place quietly, hidden beneath ordinary days that seem uneventful while they are unfolding. Gradually, this habit creates a quieter form of confidence. It is not the confidence that believes nothing will ever go wrong. It is the confidence that knows difficulties can be met without losing yourself. That difference is profound. One depends entirely on favorable circumstances. The other depends on steady character. The first disappears whenever life changes. The second grows stronger because life changes. Over time, setbacks lose much of their power to intimidate because they are no longer viewed as signs of failure. They become opportunities to practice patience, resilience, wisdom, and perspective in ways comfort never allows. The goal is not to eliminate uncertainty, but to become someone who remains grounded while walking through it. That is the quiet strength the Stoics cultivated, and it remains just as powerful today because human nature has changed far less than the world around it. Seneca practiced this discipline in a way that surprised many people around him. Although he possessed significant wealth later in life, he deliberately chose certain days to live with almost nothing. He wore simple clothing, ate plain food, and slept without luxury, even though greater comfort was available to him. Before beginning these periods, he would ask himself whether this was really the condition he feared so much. The answer, repeated again and again through experience, was almost always the same. The discomfort was real, but it was far less frightening than the imagination had suggested. By voluntarily stepping into simplicity, he discovered that many fears lose their power once they are faced directly. The mind often exaggerates future hardship because it has never tested its own resilience. Experience quietly corrects that illusion better than reassurance ever can. This practice was never about rejecting pleasure or pretending that comfort has no value. The Stoics appreciated good food, warm homes, meaningful friendships, and moments of ease. They simply refused to let those things become conditions for happiness. There is an important difference between enjoying something and believing you cannot live well without it. The first creates gratitude. The second creates dependence. Whenever peace depends entirely on external conditions, life becomes surprisingly fragile because circumstances are constantly changing. Wealth can disappear. Health can change. Convenience can vanish overnight. A person whose contentment rests entirely upon those things finds themselves emotionally shaken whenever fortune shifts. The Stoics wanted something steadier. They wanted a mind capable of remaining balanced even when life became less comfortable than expected. Modern psychology offers an interesting parallel to this ancient practice. Researchers have found that people quickly adapt to improvements in comfort, a process known as hedonic adaptation. What once felt extraordinary gradually becomes ordinary. The new home eventually feels normal. The latest purchase loses its excitement. Greater convenience quietly becomes the expected standard rather than a source of appreciation. This explains why constantly acquiring more rarely produces lasting satisfaction. The mind adjusts, raises its expectations, and begins searching for the next improvement. Voluntary simplicity interrupts that cycle. By temporarily stepping away from familiar comforts, we allow appreciation to return naturally. The ordinary becomes meaningful again because we experience it with fresh awareness instead of quiet entitlement. Gratitude grows stronger, not through having more, but through remembering that what we already possess was never guaranteed. There are countless ways this practice can appear in everyday life without becoming extreme. Choosing to walk instead of driving a short distance. Spending time without reaching for a phone during every quiet moment. Eating a simple meal when something more elaborate is available. taking a cold shower, exercising when comfort encourages staying still, or sitting peacefully with boredom instead of immediately escaping into distraction. None of these actions are impressive by themselves. Their value comes from what they teach the mind. They remind us that temporary discomfort does not have to become immediate suffering. We are often far more capable than our habits suggest. Each small challenge gently expands confidence because it proves that discomfort can be experienced without panic. That lesson slowly begins appearing in situations far beyond the original exercise. There is another benefit hidden beneath these practices, one that is easy to overlook. Voluntary discomfort strengthens appreciation in ways comfort alone never can. A warm meal tastes different after genuine hunger. Rest feels deeper after honest effort. Silence becomes more meaningful after constant noise. Simplicity restores our ability to notice blessings that familiarity had quietly hidden from view. Many people believe gratitude comes from accumulating more reasons to be thankful. The Stoics understood something more subtle. Gratitude often grows because we remove, even briefly, the things we have stopped noticing. Their temporary absence allows appreciation to awaken again. Suddenly, the ordinary feels extraordinary, not because the world changed, but because attention became clearer. Little by little, this discipline also reshapes our relationship with fear. Many anxieties revolve around losing comfort, security, or convenience. Yet every time we willingly practice living with a little less, those fears become less convincing. The mind begins trusting its own resilience instead of doubting it. Confidence no longer depends on the promise that life will always remain easy. It grows from repeated evidence that even when circumstances become difficult, we remain capable of responding with patience, clarity, and steadiness. That is the quiet freedom the Stoics sought. They were not trying to make life harder than necessary. They were preparing themselves so that when life inevitably became difficult on its own, they would already know something deeply reassuring. They had faced discomfort before, they had learned from it, and they had discovered that lasting peace had never depended on perfect comfort in the first place. That realization remains just as liberating now as it was more than 2,000 years ago. Once we discover that peace depends on far less than we once believed, our attention naturally shifts towards something less visible but far more influential. The body is shaped by what it repeatedly consumes, and the mind follows the same principle. Every conversation, every headline, every book, every social media post, every opinion we welcome into our attention quietly leaves behind a trace. Most people think they choose what enters their minds, but habits often choose for them. A few idle minutes become endless scrolling. One notification becomes an hour of distraction. Before long, the thoughts occupying the mind no longer feel borrowed. They begin sounding like our own. The Stoics understood that this process happens slowly, almost invisibly, which is precisely why they treated it with such care. They knew that character is not only built by what we intentionally practice. It is also shaped by what we repeatedly allow ourselves to absorb without question. Modern life offers more information than any generation in history has ever possessed. Yet information and wisdom have never been the same thing. Every day we are invited into arguments that have nothing to do with our lives, encouraged to compare ourselves with carefully edited versions of strangers, and surrounded by opinions that compete endlessly for our attention. The result is rarely greater understanding. More often, it is mental exhaustion. The mind was never designed to carry thousands of voices at once. It gradually becomes crowded, making it difficult to distinguish genuine conviction from borrowed belief. The Stoics recognized that attention is one of our most valuable resources because wherever attention settles, thought begins to grow. If attention is scattered endlessly, the mind eventually reflects that same confusion. If attention is guided carefully, clarity quietly begins replacing noise. Seneca frequently encouraged returning to a small number of trustworthy thinkers rather than chasing every new idea that appeared. He believed there was greater value in deeply understanding a few enduring principles than in collecting endless fragments of disconnected knowledge. His advice feels surprisingly relevant today. Many people consume countless articles, videos, and conversations without allowing any of them enough time to become genuine understanding. The mind becomes full while remaining strangely unsatisfied. Wisdom develops differently. It requires patience, repetition, and thoughtful reflection. Reading a single meaningful page with complete attention often changes a person more than rushing through an entire book simply to reach the last chapter. Depth has always transformed people more reliably than endless variety. Psychology describes this through the principle of cognitive priming. The information we repeatedly encounter influences how we interpret later experiences, often without conscious awareness. Spend hours surrounded by conflict, and the world begins appearing more threatening than it truly is. Constant exposure to comparison makes ordinary achievements feel insufficient. Endless urgency creates the impression that every moment requires immediate reaction. None of these influences announce themselves loudly. They settle quietly beneath awareness until they become part of our normal way of thinking. The Stoics arrived at a similar understanding simply by observing human behavior. They recognized that a peaceful mind does not emerge by accident. It grows through repeated exposure to ideas that strengthen judgment instead of weakening it. Every influence either steadies the mind or slowly unsettles it. This does not mean withdrawing completely from the world or refusing to hear opinions different from our own. The Stoics were not encouraging isolation. They were encouraging discernment. There is an important difference. A healthy mind remains open without becoming unguarded. It listens carefully without accepting everything it hears. It asks whether a particular influence encourages wisdom, patience, honesty, and courage, or whether it simply stimulates fear, outrage, and distraction. That question quietly changes the way we choose books, conversations, entertainment, and even silence itself. Sometimes the wisest influence is not another opinion at all. Sometimes it is a few uninterrupted moments alone with our own thoughts, allowing the mind to settle before inviting another voice inside. Over time, these choices become less about avoiding negativity and more about intentionally cultivating clarity. A thoughtful conversation begins carrying more value than endless debate. A timeless book becomes more nourishing than another passing controversy. Quiet reflection feels less uncomfortable because the mind is no longer dependent on constant stimulation. Even ordinary moments become opportunities to strengthen attention rather than surrender it. This gradual shift changes the quality of everyday life in ways that are difficult to measure but impossible to ignore. Decisions become steadier because they are no longer driven by every passing opinion. Emotional reactions become gentler because fewer unnecessary influences are constantly demanding attention. The mind slowly regains its natural ability to focus on what truly deserves care. Little by little, wisdom stops feeling like something collected from countless sources and begins revealing itself as something carefully cultivated through consistent choices. Every idea welcomed into the mind leaves a mark, just as every meal leaves its mark upon the body. The happiest people understand this quietly. They are not happier because they know more facts than everyone else. They are happier because they have learned to protect the quality of what shapes their thinking. They choose influences that strengthen rather than scatter them, conversations that deepen rather than drain them, and moments of silence that allow understanding to take root. In doing so, they discover that lasting clarity rarely comes from consuming more. It grows from choosing carefully, reflecting patiently, and allowing timeless wisdom to become a trusted companion through the ordinary rhythm of daily life. As the mind becomes quieter, something begins to change that is difficult to explain until it has been experienced. Gratitude no longer feels like a habit that must be forced or a list that must be completed before bed. Instead, it becomes a different way of looking at life itself. Most people assume gratitude is something reserved for extraordinary moments, for major achievements, unexpected good fortune, or dreams finally becoming reality. The Stoics saw it differently. They believed the greatest treasures often arrive so consistently that they become invisible. A healthy body that continues breathing without effort, a familiar voice answering the phone, the warmth of sunlight through a window, a peaceful evening after a demanding day. These ordinary gifts quietly surround us, yet the mind easily overlooks them because familiarity has convinced us they are guaranteed. The happiest people rarely possess more than everyone else. They simply notice more of what has already been present all along. Marcus Aurelius began his private writings in a way that surprises many readers. Before reflecting on hardship, duty, or personal discipline, he spent time remembering the people who had shaped him. He expressed gratitude for the patience of one teacher, the kindness of another, the integrity of family members, and the examples left by those who came before him. He did not rush toward his own struggles. He first acknowledged the countless influences that had quietly guided him throughout life. That choice reveals something important about the Stoic understanding of gratitude. It was never meant to ignore difficulty or pretend suffering did not exist. Instead, gratitude created balance. It reminded the mind that even during challenging seasons, goodness continued existing beside hardship. Both could be true at the same time. The ability to recognize one did not require denying the other. There is an interesting tendency within human nature that psychologists sometimes call the negativity bias. The mind naturally pays more attention to problems than to ordinary moments of peace, because throughout history, noticing danger increased the chances of survival. While this instinct once protected human life, it now often leaves people constantly searching for what is wrong while overlooking what is quietly going right. One mistake receives more attention than 10 successes. One criticism echoes louder than several sincere compliments. A single disappointment overshadows an entire week filled with ordinary blessings. The Stoics understood this tendency long before modern psychology described it. Their practice of gratitude gently corrected that imbalance by deliberately directing attention toward what remained good instead of allowing every difficulty to dominate awareness. This shift in attention does not require pretending that life is perfect. In fact, gratitude becomes most meaningful when practiced during imperfect circumstances. Anyone can appreciate life when everything unfolds according to plan. The real transformation begins when gratitude survives disappointment. A difficult week may still contain a loyal friend. An uncertain season may still offer moments of quiet beauty. Even grief often exists beside love because the depth of sorrow reflects the depth of what once mattered. Gratitude allows these truths to exist together without forcing one to erase the other. The Stoics never encouraged blind optimism. They encouraged honest perception. Honest perception notices pain without becoming blind to everything else. That balance protects the mind from becoming trapped inside a single emotional experience. Many people unknowingly postpone gratitude until life reaches an imagined destination. They believe they will appreciate the present after achieving the next goal, earning more money, finding the right relationship, or solving every lingering problem. Yet, each milestone quickly becomes ordinary once it arrives. The promotion becomes another job. The larger home becomes familiar. The long-awaited opportunity quietly becomes part of everyday routine. Without realizing it, the mind simply moves the finish line once again. The Stoics warned against this habit because they understood that gratitude delayed is often gratitude denied. If appreciation depends entirely on future circumstances, it never truly arrives. There will always be another goal waiting beyond the current one. The happiest people interrupt that endless pursuit by appreciating the present while still working faithfully toward tomorrow. This practice also changes the way we see other people. Small acts of kindness become easier to notice. The co-worker who offers help without expecting recognition. The family member who quietly carries responsibilities every day. The stranger whose patience makes an ordinary moment easier. These gestures often disappear into routine simply because they happen so frequently. Gratitude restores our ability to see them clearly. It reminds us that much of what makes life meaningful is not dramatic at all. It lives inside ordinary conversations, familiar faces, shared meals, thoughtful words, and quiet moments that pass unnoticed unless attention has been trained to recognize them. Happiness grows stronger whenever appreciation becomes more detailed. Instead of vaguely feeling thankful, we begin understanding exactly why certain moments deserve our attention. There is also a profound sense of freedom hidden within gratitude. When we stop measuring life only by what is missing, we recover the ability to enjoy what is already present. This does not reduce ambition or encourage complacency. The Stoics remained deeply committed to growth, responsibility, and excellence. Gratitude simply ensured that their pursuit of improvement never robbed them of their ability to appreciate the journey itself. They could strive for more without believing they currently possessed nothing of value. That balance prevented desire from becoming endless dissatisfaction. Progress remained meaningful because it grew from appreciation instead of emptiness. A grateful mind continues building a better future while refusing to overlook the quiet abundance that already exists. Over time, gratitude becomes less like an exercise and more like a habit of perception. The world itself has not changed, yet everything begins appearing through clearer eyes. Ordinary mornings feel richer. Familiar relationships feel more precious. Simple routines carry unexpected meaning because they are no longer dismissed as insignificant. The happiest people do not spend their lives waiting for extraordinary moments to justify their happiness. They discover that extraordinary meaning has been quietly hidden inside ordinary life all along. Their attention simply learned where to rest. That quiet change transforms not only how they remember the past or imagine the future, but how they fully experience the present, and that steady awareness becomes one of the deepest forms of peace a human being can cultivate throughout an entire lifetime. Eventually, every Stoic practice leads toward one quiet realization that gives meaning to everything else. Time is limited, not in an abstract philosophical sense, but in the most personal way imaginable. Every sunrise arrives only once. Every conversation happens only once. Every ordinary afternoon that feels forgettable quietly becomes part of a life that can never be repeated. Yet most people move through their days as though there will always be another chance to say the important words, repair the strained relationship, pursue the meaningful goal, or become the person they have always intended to be. The assumption is rarely spoken aloud, but it shapes countless decisions. There will be more time tomorrow. There will be another opportunity next month. There will be a better moment someday. The Stoics challenged this assumption not because they wanted people to fear death, but because they believed remembering life's limits is one of the clearest ways to discover how it should be lived. Marcus Aurelius returned to this idea throughout his private reflections. He reminded himself again and again that he could leave life at any moment, and rather than filling him with despair, the thought sharpened his attention. It encouraged him to speak with greater honesty, act with greater kindness, and waste less energy on things that would never truly matter. He understood something that remains just as relevant now as it was 2,000 years ago. Forgetting that life is finite often leads people to spend it carelessly. Remembering its limits encourages them to spend it wisely. Every unnecessary argument suddenly appears smaller. Every act of generosity becomes more meaningful. Every moment spent with someone we love quietly gains value because we stop assuming it can always be repeated. Modern life makes this easy to forget. Endless schedules, constant distractions, and the steady rhythm of ordinary responsibilities create the comforting illusion that tomorrow is guaranteed. Weeks pass unnoticed because they resemble the weeks before them. Important conversations are postponed until a more convenient time. Dreams are delayed until circumstances improve. Gratitude is reserved for some future version of life that seems permanently just beyond reach. Yet certainty about the future has never belonged to anyone. The Stoics did not dwell on this reality to create anxiety. They reflected on it because clarity changes priorities. The awareness that time is precious naturally encourages us to spend less of it on resentment, comparison, and trivial concerns. We begin asking quieter but more meaningful questions. Does this deserve my attention? Will this matter a year from now? Is this the person I want to be while I still have the opportunity to choose? There is something deeply freeing about recognizing that our days are finite. At first, the idea sounds heavy, almost uncomfortable, but its effect is surprisingly gentle. It loosens the grip of countless unnecessary worries. The criticism that lingered for days begins losing its importance. The endless pursuit of approval becomes less convincing. Small inconveniences no longer deserve the same emotional investment because they are measured against something much larger. Time becomes the standard instead of emotion. Once that shift happens, many frustrations quietly dissolve on their own. They have not disappeared because life became easier. They disappeared because perspective finally arrived. The mind stopped treating every passing irritation as though it deserved the same attention as the people, values, and moments that truly shape a meaningful life. This awareness also transforms relationships. It becomes harder to stay angry over small misunderstandings when we remember that every meeting could one day become a memory. Kindness begins feeling less optional. Forgiveness becomes easier because pride no longer seems worth the cost. We notice the familiar faces around us with fresh appreciation instead of assuming they will always remain where they are today. Ordinary conversations become opportunities rather than obligations. A shared meal, a thoughtful message, a quiet walk beside someone we care about all begin carrying a significance that routine had previously hidden. We stop postponing words that need to be spoken and become more generous with our attention because we understand that presence itself is one of the greatest gifts we can offer another person. The Stoics believed that remembering mortality did not make love weaker. It made love more intentional because it removed the illusion that unlimited time would always be available. Psychology offers an interesting observation that echoes this ancient wisdom. Studies suggest that people often become more focused on emotionally meaningful experiences when they perceive time as limited. Priorities naturally shift away from endless accumulation and toward genuine connection. The Stoics understood this long before modern research gave it a name. They recognized that awareness of life's limits changes attention itself. Instead of endlessly chasing more possessions, more recognition, or more certainty, the mind gradually turns toward what creates lasting fulfillment. Character matters more than reputation. Presence matters more than speed. Meaning matters more than appearance. These changes rarely happen because someone forces them. They happen because perspective quietly reorganizes what feels important. This way of living is not about counting the days with sadness. It is about filling the days with intention. The Stoics never encouraged obsession with death. They encouraged respect for life. Every morning becomes more valuable because it was never promised. Every opportunity to learn, help, forgive, create, or simply appreciate another peaceful moment becomes something worth noticing instead of postponing. Even ordinary routines begin feeling richer because they are experienced with awareness rather than habit. The smallest moments often become the most meaningful once we stop rushing past them in search of something bigger. Happiness quietly grows whenever attention returns to the life already unfolding, instead of endlessly waiting for a future that remains uncertain. Perhaps that is why the happiest people often seem remarkably present. They laugh more freely, listen more carefully, and worry less about impressing others because they understand something many people spend years overlooking. Time is life's most valuable possession precisely because it cannot be replaced. Every Stoic practice ultimately prepares the mind for this realization. Discipline teaches us how to spend our days. Reflection teaches us how to learn from them. Gratitude teaches us how to appreciate them. Acceptance teaches us how to endure them. Together they reveal a simple truth. A meaningful life is rarely built through extraordinary moments alone. It is built through ordinary days lived with awareness, guided by character, and never taken for granted. When we remember that today was never guaranteed, we stop merely passing through life and begin truly living it, one thoughtful moment at a time. Peace is never built in a single moment. It is built quietly, choice by choice, habit by habit, until one day you realize that the life you once hoped for has slowly become the life you're living. The Stoics understood that happiness was never hidden in perfect circumstances. It was always waiting inside the way we choose to think, to act, and to meet each new day.